48-hour art check, round 140 something, 145, 144,
Yeah.
145. Look at that.
Yeah. We're
It's typically the thing that you figure out before you press the go live button, but all
I
right.
love it.
And we've got Squatchy in the chats. How's it going, man?
Hey Squatchy, how you doing?
Oh,
Did
okay.
I
So
say
I
I'm
think
like a mobster? I think I have a tendency to do that. How you doing?
it's either that or Joey from Friends. But
Um,
yeah, I think we're both in a. I'm not physically tired. I'm mentally tired, and it's putting
yeah,
me
me
in kind of
too.
like a loopy state, goofy, loopy. So this could be an interesting episode. So anyway, yeah. All right, let's jump in. And if anybody has any topic ideas or questions or suggestions, we are still debating on what our topic should be. So we usually do
Yeah,
this first part for about 15 minutes. Day 97. That's awesome, man. 3 more days. That's got to feel good.
good man. That's huge. Is this Squatchy? Is this your first hundreds? I think second run, right? Or first run? Well, let us know in the chats.
Yeah, I think first, but I'm not sure. It's hard to keep track because there's so many people.
Too many, but
Yeah.
I think it's your first. If it's your first, congrats. If it's your second, hats off to you, sir.
Yeah. It's his
All right.
first. So yeah, so for those of you that don't know, 100 Days of Making Comics is, I believe, one of the most difficult challenges you can do out there. Just because 100 days is so long, and there's
Yeah.
always something that comes up. I don't think anyone in the history of humanity has ever had 100 days strung together where they haven't had some sort of at least like moderate to major thing that is massively disrupting. That's just like, and so being able to continue to create in the midst of all of that is rad. So anyway, yeah. So good job. That's cool. Don't poop out now though. Like you've still got 3 days to go. So I'll congratulate you on Monday.
Yeah, that's true. Hang in there. But Squatchy, that's huge, man, and that's good. And I hope it kind of unlocks the same thing it unlocks for most people when they finish the hundreds. That beautiful moment of kind of seeing what the 100 days did,
Yeah.
which is cool.
Cool.
Should we jump in?
Yeah. Let's do it. I'll
All right.
start. I have a real simple one. I wanted to get way farther on this, but I'll address that into my challenges section. But I am working on a Laughs for Giraffes logo slash illustration, which will basically be used to raise funds for like conservationist efforts and anti-poaching stuff for giraffes in Africa. And my buddy runs this organization, and so anyway, it's been fun. And I'll tell you the best part about this. I had never done this before. Giraffes are hilariously expressive. They
Yeah.
have the most malleable, I don't know what you'd call that, muzzles. Like their mouths are like cartoonish. And if you just go to Google Images and just search giraffe expressions, and it's like all over the place. I mean, it's pretty crazy. So I tried to get that anyway. So I'll knock that out today or tomorrow. But that's mainly what I've been working on. Plus like a bunch of minor stuff that's not worth mentioning.
Yeah, I almost want to look at giraffe skulls because they do have that like wobbly, like they're like two mouth, like the top and bottom of their mouth just kind of wiggle and wobble. To me, I'm like just seeing it and seeing your sketches of it. I want to see it animated, man. It's
Oh,
just
geez.
I mean, but it is kind of funny the sequence of it kind of moving its mouth and like sticking its tongue out and wrapping it around the mic.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, yeah, I think it would be pretty funny animated. I don't have the time to do that right now, but that'd be a challenge for sure. Because I typically do more of like flat 2.5D puppetry rather than like frame by frame, and that would take a lot of like tweening and frame by frame stuff. But it'd be a challenge for sure.
Yeah, but it's great. I mean, those are great studies. So I think that's really cool.
Thanks. So how about you? What have you gotten done?
All right. Another level of the water, and you'll notice a familiar mermaid making a cameo because I asked Corey on the left of the bottom. It'll be the second to the bottom one, but right now the bottom one. That's Corey's mermaid, and I kind of drew her in with permission from Corey as like a little shout out. Um, and they're almost to the bottom level. So the bottom level is going to be where they're shutting down the machine that's causing all this water to hover. And then I'm done with one page that will be read in about 10 seconds that I've spent about a week and a half on.
uh, here's a suggestion that you won't do because it's not worth it. But you should. I feel like this page particularly needs to be perforated and printed on matte paper so that it can be torn out and colored by kids.
I could actually, I have done little things like that. So maybe I will do a little dotted line. That's actually not a bad idea. In fact, I'm going to write that down because I could do like a little dotted line with scissors
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
and like maybe instructions. I might actually do that.
Because that
um,
page looks so rad, and it looks exactly like so many like really cool, fun coloring books where it's just like insanity is happening, rather than the boring ones where it's like this is a character you know in a scene you recognize. It's just like let's do chaos. I love that. Anyway, it's fun.
yeah, I might actually. That's funny, but I might actually apply that because there is a point earlier in the comic where I have like one of those old strips that used to be in Popeye. Popeye used to have these little cutaway things where it would have different eye expressions, and you'd be able to like make a little tube and like rotate it through the viewer so that it would change the expressions of like a face. Um, and I have that as like a little paper craft thing earlier in the book, so that actually might not be a bad little reference to kind of pull it back. So
That'd be cool.
this is why I love the art check. I get to steal great ideas.
And why
but
I love it because I don't. I just got an idea that I don't have to do anything with.
but I might actually. I'm gonna look into that, see if I can make it happen.
Yeah, Victor says it's a Denny's kids menu activity sheet, which I think is good. Like that, I don't know. You go to restaurants and the lame kids menus are like, oh come on guys, you phoned that in. But like the really super cool ones, you're like, oh this will actually make it so that I can eat most of this dinner with my wife.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, those kids menu things, man, that can be a really fun little side project. I used to do that as a project from one of my classrooms where I'd have them design a kids menu where they had to have a certain amount of activities and they also had to show food in a fun way. My favorite one that a student did was like a parody of like McDonald's, but each character was like the byproduct if you ate too much of that one thing. So one was like a character with like severe diabetes, but they were all plays off of like the Hamburglar, but it was like the Hamburglar like suffering from obesity and like all these other. It was a great one. Anyhow,
That's awesome.
um, yeah, cool. Let's get into challenges. So what challenges have you hit?
Oh man. So the most time consuming one is my late blooming son, who has taken his own sweet time doing everything, is approaching a year old, hasn't crawled yet. He is very mobile, just rolls everywhere, and he pivots on his belly and then will roll in a direction and pivots, and so he kind of zigzags across the room. But he has decided today and yesterday that he only wants daddy, and he is screaming his head off because he's got a tooth that you can see but it hasn't popped through the surface yet, and so he's just like losing it. And so I'm just sitting here in the rocking chair for hours singing, and anyway, it's fun bonding time and everything, but it's like really time consuming because normally I can kind of pop him in a bumbo and hang out with him while I make stuff, but it has cut in. And then just kids being kids and dealing with other kids, and like I want to solve the problems, but I have to let my kids solve the problems. And so there's like, how it takes longer to explain some things than it does to just do it yourself. It's like
Yeah.
that multiplied by like 300, because you're not explaining it to somebody who's competent. You're explaining it to a 9-year-old who's never done it before. So
Man,
yeah, lots of stuff like that. I don't know.
those are legit challenges. Do you guys have one of those like chew things for a kid when they're teething that like kind of vibrates when they bite on it?
No vibrating one. No, that's I haven't heard of that. That's cool.
Those are brilliant. So it's like there's one we had that was like a strawberry, but if you like bit down on it, it would be like bzzz, like which would soothe their tooth.
Right.
Like so it's kind of a it's just I don't know. We found it really helpful.
I'm totally getting that.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Rough times though. Rough times. But I do, I'm gonna be the cliche parent and be like, I miss it. And you're like, no, you don't.
No, it's fun. I mean, snuggles are fun. Yeah, I don't know. It's yeah, but at the same time, and that's one of those things where like in my mind, I just have to like make a decision. Like I'm gonna be present in this moment, because my natural inclination is to think of all the things I'm not getting done. And
Yeah.
so, and then once I decide that, I'm having fun. I'm singing bubblegum pop punk to him, and rocking in the rocking chair. We're just rocking out to Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco, and just kind of hang out. So it's not bad. Yeah, it's all right. Like 4 in the morning, it's a little bit less entertaining.
Rough, yeah. I think, yeah. I mean, thinking back on those times, I remember times where I was like near crying, but like the only thing that would calm my son was like AC/DC. So we put on
Right.
AC/DC and like rock him to sleep. Like,
Oh,
and I'm
and
just AC/DC, like kind of having fun, but like I need sleep.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
If you haven't ever experienced the being so tired that you're on the verge of tears all the time, as a man, that's a weird thing. And I
oh,
remember with my daughter, like, um, I remember one day she screamed on the monitor and woke up, and I remember just literally going, "No, I can't." Like, and my wife is like, "I got it," and I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna go back to sleep." And it's just like we were both so exhausted. It's just like, oh, I don't know what it is with that, but yeah.
no, I
Anyway,
think I think it could even break like a complete barbarian who's just like war ready, like hasn't shed a tear in their life. I think they'd get pretty teary eyed after 1 year of having a kid.
if you look at what people do to break soldiers in torture situations,
Yeah,
those conditions are almost exactly the same as having a kid that won't sleep.
that's true.
Just super loud noises, bright lights. You can't get a drink of water because then the kid screams louder, and then you're not allowed to sleep for days on end.
Yeah.
I realize that there are much, much worse situations, and I'm exaggerating a little bit, but only a little bit. So anyway,
Only
probably
slightly, actually not at all. Not
yeah.
not really exaggerating at all. Actually telling completely the truth. So let's. Oh, I didn't say. I guess I'll go into mine. My struggles, my challenges were basically just it's ramping up at my work to that point where like the work requests start pouring in, and it's just more than our capacity. And I'm leading a team right now that's just like so good and on top of things. But there's just this brain frying thing that happens when you're juggling. This is like the point where being an art director, like a lot of people don't quite comprehend the shifting of thought that you have to do for an entire day where you're doing design, you're making design decisions, you're solving other people's problems because you have people coming in all the time going, well, what do I do with this? What do you think of this? What do you think I should do with this? How's this? Is this what the client wanted? Oh, what did this like salesperson mean by this request? Like, and you're being like a translator, a designer, and then at the same time you're like doing design yourself, having to do all this problem solving. and then dealing with like these little things that come up throughout the day, on top of just normal managerial stuff, like, you know, trying to make sure people don't take like 50-hour breaks and stuff like that. So doing all that, and then like at the peak of rush season where like the designs you're having to do and the questions you're having to field, and like there's like a high to it, and I actually really enjoy it, but it just leaves you like, your brain feels like, you know how like when you dissect frogs back in the day, you'd have to do the two pins and twist the pin to like, you know, break the brain of the frog so that it's not going to feel the dissection. It's like that. I feel like a frog that just had two pins stuck in there, and just like my brain is, I've been shifting thought modes, thought modalities so much like in the last week, that every time I've gotten home, I'm like, what's my again? Like, where do I live? Oh, okay, okay. Um, and so it's definitely been one of those weeks where like walking into a room, usually the first thing I do is just say to myself, okay, okay. Like it's just constant prep to like be like, okay, I can handle this. I can step into this room and breathe, and like it's hard to shut that off. And so so yeah, so that's probably my biggest struggle
I
this week
bet
is,
I bet your commute helps a lot
oh yeah, yeah.
because
It
I
definitely helps pull it down.
there were times when I was an art director, and I lived 5 miles from my office. This is like a 7 minute drive, and there were times where I forgot to switch from work mode to home mode, and it was early on in my marriage, and I came home and I'd be like still in like manager art director
Oh, giving
mode.
all these directives.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, this needs to happen. I need you to do this. When are you gonna have this done? And she's like, hey, hi, I don't work for you, so maybe go outside and try that again. And oh, sorry. so, so, so I learned like in my mind when I was in a state where I wasn't able to switch over well, I'd take a more scenic route home just to give myself some time to realize like I'm
Yeah,
in a car heading towards my home where I have no employees.
yeah.
you know, and then yeah, it was a lot better after that.
No,
so
I mean it is definitely weird because I mean there's just a lot of things. It's like when you're in leader, well, maybe that could be our topic, but when you're in leadership, there's like certain costumes you kind of have to put on, and it's really hard to take off when you're at home. And so like yeah, the drive definitely helps me wind down. Usually my best ideas having to do with like what to do with my team and stuff like that happen on my drive home, or on my drive there,
yeah,
where it's like I have this, you know, hour or so to like really reflect on things and kind of have silence, which is really valuable for kind of problem solving. So like yeah, but definitely I've had that struggle even with the drive where you get home and you're like, you know, like directives, and it's like, no, I'm not the head of this ship. And that's actually a good thing because
yeah,
like frankly when I get home, like I kind of enjoy not, I like on vacations I've had a couple people be like, "Where do you want to eat?" And I'm like, "You decide. Like, you lead.
yeah,
You tell me." Because I'm sick of telling people. Like, and I get a real kick out of it. Like actually having other people lead, because it's just it's a lot to just constantly be doing. So yeah.
yeah,
Anyhow, not a bad struggle. I enjoy it. Like I said, there's a weird rush to it. I can see why people stay in it. That's what's kept me in it, is like just there's a um it's a hard to explain thing when you're leading a group of people and they achieve the impossible, and you're kind of at the helm. Like that's a really I don't know, it's a like it's hard to even explain unless you've done it, you know.
yeah. I think I've got a good idea for a topic. I think we'll go with that. So I
Cool.
think yeah, that'll do it. So let's do plans real fast. Um, I didn't have a chance to do anything with the audio, and I've got to work with Marshall on the music, and so I'm gonna get that knocked out. I've got to get some things uploaded to a drive, and then I'm going to finish off this logo. And then I will still have a couple days left after that. So I believe I will either, depending on my mood, this is a mood thing. So I'm either going to color another couple pages of my book, or I will start plotting out a short animation, because I want to. I've been kind of in an animation kick, and I want to see if I can do like a really cool animated short, something maybe like 30 to 60 seconds, but super fast with like a bunch of scenes in it. So
Like a giraffe on a microphone.
I don't know if you know Mike Roush, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, but he's pretty high up in Titmouse, which is they do a ton of stuff on Adult Swim, and
Yeah.
anyway, he's rad, and he has several animations that I was just reviewing some of his work today, and I was like, dude, he's got this one where it's just the life cycle of a fly, and I think it's like 34 seconds long, and it's just got like hardcore electric guitars and super fast drums, and it's legit one of the coolest things. I could watch it all the time and never get sick of it. It's just so incredible the way he did it. And so I keep thinking like I could do, I could do like
Yeah.
30 to 60 seconds or whatever. So I
Yeah.
don't know.
Tying back into the last art checks topic, but like it's kind of like you're seeing this thing and you're like, I can close that gap,
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how about you? What about plans?
Um, so I definitely want to finish this page, although now if I'm adding the dotted line with like maybe directions or something, that might add a little bit of time, but I think it might be worth it. Um, Other than that, like um, basically just continue the kind of top secret like branding thing I've been working on. And I'd like to, I don't know, maybe, well, I guess our next art check is Monday, so I got to be more ambitious. I'll have the page finished, and then I will probably try to do another blog post as well, because I want to start doing like at least a weekly blog post.
Mm.
And for those of you out there too, who are like following my stuff on Tapas, I am back at the weekly updates on that. I let it drop for about 2 weeks while I was rebranding the website, but that will be right back on track. So if you're subscribed on there or haven't yet, definitely subscribe, because I'll be posting weekly again up until it catches up. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm interested in the chat before we announce the topic for the podcast. What are your anti burnout activities? What do you guys do to avoid burnout, or to give yourself a break, or to relax? And the reason I ask that is there's a lot of studies and things that point towards the value of downtime for creativity and productivity and memory and focus and all kinds of stuff like that. And so I think the conversation that we were talking about with the commute and switching brain modalities, but needing like downtime to do that and whatever, I think it'll be kind of interesting. Plus, quick announcement. Sunday night, about this time, I'm going to have Taylor Cashton on the show, and Josh may or may not be able to make that, so he'll be kind of a last minute call on that. But he is a super fascinating guy, graphic designer, illustrator, animator, who worked himself so hard that he gave himself like this super weird heart arrhythmia dealio that like almost killed him. And so now he's like developed a system to like manage what he calls his addiction to like hyper productivity, like unhealthy, toxic hyper productivity.
Got it.
So it'll be an interesting topic, and the reason I bring that up. So let me jump into the topic. Today's topic is the value of downtime to your productivity. It sounds like a counterintuitive thing, but actually carving out time to allow yourself a break is super important. If you only push hard all the time, what you're going to find is that you might be spending the same amount of time, but you're going to be less productive over time. And it's kind of like if you're like Stephen R. Covey, who wrote, Highly Effective Habits. Uh, he calls it sharpening your saw. You know, if you have like a saw or an axe or something and you're chopping down trees, and you never take the time to sharpen it, even though like while you're sharpening it, you're not actively cutting down a tree. Um, if you never take the time to sharpen it, eventually it gets so dull that you're just beating the edge of the tree with this dull piece of wood or dull piece of metal, right? Whereas if you would take the time to stop working, quote unquote, and sharpen your saw, then you're going to work more effectively, more efficiently, and in a way that doesn't cause you, to kind of burn out and go in these kind of neurotic kind of like spurts, sprints and crashes. And so I thought it would just be an interesting topic because Josh has an hour-long commute and is going into rush season, and I've had to actively because of the reasons that I am productive in the evening, because it's like my productivity is kind of like self-medicating. Um, I produce things because it makes me feel good. That can turn toxic really fast because I can never stop doing it, and then I burn out, and it hurts my relationships, and it hurts my mental health and everything. And so, but then there's also like studies and stuff that we could talk about. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of introduce that topic
Yeah.
because it seems like if you were to kind of come at this podcast and just hit a couple of these episodes, you might think that that Josh and I were the type of people who would be that kind of cult of busy, the kind of worship of pedal to the metal situation, and I'm very much not that. I think that's a super toxic thing to like to worship at the feet of burning the candle at both ends for
Yeah.
24/7. That's it's not a good or healthy thing. But people who are not in a healthy relationship with productivity often look at it in extremes and say, well, I can either do what I'm doing, which is the bare minimum. I go to work, I do what the bare minimum is, and then I entertain myself into numbness until I sleep, or I can pedal to the metal, burn the candle at both ends, give up sleep all the time, and just become this machine.
Yeah.
There's a nice nuanced middle, and that's, I believe, where there's a nice healthy spot to be, where if you need sleep, you sleep, and if you need a break, you take a break. But you do make choices to produce in spite of opportunities to not do that, or to do something that isn't worthwhile, or waste a bunch of time, or give into the resistance of that. And so there's this weird balance, because you've got to push, but pushing too hard is unhealthy, and not pushing at all is not productive, and not, I don't feel like you're living your best life. So
Yeah.
kind of initial thoughts.
Yeah, well, so I just for anybody who might be skeptical who's listening, although I think there's so much truth to it, I doubt you would. But if somebody is skeptical of it, as if like, what's this new idea, this kind of self-helpy idea, this is actually something that, like, I mean, Abraham Lincoln was quoted as saying, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I'll spend the first four sharpening the axe." So, and Lincoln was under a lot of pressure and probably very overworked, but that's a guy who was saying that he spends a lot of time in preparation and thought, and then the minor amount of time in the action. That the action, like, there's action the whole way through, but one action is kind of smart and the other is decisive and full of movement, right? And so, like, that's something to kind of consider, and definitely something that I tend to swing on the side of the two kind of personalities. I tend to be the one who I'm always more on the verge of like burning the candle at both ends. And so it's something I have to be conscious of. And I think people sway one way or the other. And this isn't a personality thing, because I think when you start feeling, well, like I was describing about leading an art team, when you accomplish the impossible, it's kind of a high. Um, that can be a really dangerous high, if you go too full bore into it, because like once again, then your life becomes about work, and if your life is about work, then you're going to find yourself burning out. And but like I said, there's a real positive thing to it. So like I think once you've experienced that, or experienced what Cory and I experience all the time, which is like, completing projects and like getting these dreams we have, like sort of starting to carve away at them and actually seeing things come to fruition out of it. um, that becomes really addictive, and that can be really deceptive as well. And like I said, I think we're both kind of more on the side of like probably trending towards the latter version, where we're tempted to burn out. So for me, I have to consciously remind myself, to kind of like Cory was describing with his kid. Like, I have moments like that with my son all the time. Today he's really obsessed with like Mario Brothers, even though he doesn't have a gaming system. And so we have all these Mario figures, and like he makes levels in the room, and like we like jump Mario through all these things, and Mario's like fighting these other people, and like dinosaurs are coming into the mix and like trying to eat everybody, and like there's these games with these complex rules we come up with. And if I'm in my right state of mind, I'll be totally present with my son and get into the game, and I'll have a good time. But if I start thinking about like, hey, like I need to work on my website, I need to like work on this other thing, I need to work on these big dreams and stuff, suddenly I'm a really bad dad with a son that I'm starting to resent because it's pulling from my time. And rather than thinking like, hey, I'm lucky to have this time with my kid, and also not only that, but like this will give me fuel for that other stuff, because this is the gasoline for like my creative life anyways, like is my family. Like I love my family. It's half of why I work professionally. It's like the majority of why I can even do what I do is because I have a really supportive and awesome family. So it's like, to me, that's one thing, is like choosing to be present. Another thing is just like doing weird things. Like today, I just sense that I'm like getting towards that point, as it's starting to ramp up, and that I need to read. Like I need to actually have a moment where I read some comics. So I finally picked up this book on the way home from work that I ordered from my local comic shop, because I'm going to consciously try to start ordering my graphic novels through my comic shop, because they don't really carry a lot of indies near here. But this is the third Berlin book by Jason Lutz, and so I need a little bit of that to kind of fuel my creativity. Because if I'm just blindly working on my graphic novel without paying attention to graphic novels and cartoonists that inspire me, once again, I'm going to burn out. So it's like, I tend to have to consciously remind myself, to have breaks. I would say I know a lot of people who have the opposite problem, where they could use a little bit of the kick in the pants. Those tend to be the people who say, well, I don't have time, so I can't work on my projects. The second somebody's saying that, I feel like they probably have the opposite problem. Rarely have I met somebody who doesn't have the time. So
Yeah,
anyhow,
I had a student come into my office today. Really awesome student. I have had him in several classes, and he just said, I just want to get some advice from you. He's taking several 300 and 400 level classes that are all project based. Plus, he's got a kid at home, and his wife is also doing that, and so they're managing like job, school, family, like in his senior year and stuff. And then he's also doing like he's taking one of my classes, which is the capstone class, which is one of the most intense experiences that most of these students have had, and it is very demanding. It's basically like my attempts to say, let's not kind of like peter out at the end here. Let's just sprint past the finish line and come up with three major, huge portfolio case studies that you can come up with. So anyway, so with all that, he's like, he was talking to me, and I started just listing off a couple things, and I was like, you probably know all this, but I'm just going to throw some of this out there. So interrupt me if this triggers anything. But I said it feels often like you need to just go all the time. There's two things that are probably happening. One is the time that you are pedal to the metal on some of this stuff. You're probably not being as efficient or effective as you think you are.
Yeah.
And that's because you haven't taken the time to give yourself some non-productive time, some downtime, a break of some kind, to allow your brain to kind of recuperate. And the other thing is the time that it takes you to switch tasks, what we've called that task switching penalty in the past, is probably compounded by the fact that you're getting resistance into starting. His eyes started lighting up. He started nodding, and what I mean by that is it's when you should be doing something, and then something mundane begins to feel like the most urgent thing ever. For
Yeah.
example, several weeks ago, I needed to sit down and do some stuff, and for some reason, I felt the pressing need to sharpen all of the pencils in my studio. Like I had to get that done. That had to happen. Or like I haven't done the dishes for a while and I'm about to go downstairs to hit the studio, and then I look and I'm like, I really need to do the dishes right now. It's like they can wait an hour. They're going to be fine, right? But it's that type of thing where you are about to move into a productive time, but it takes you longer than a couple of minutes. And so if you actually pay attention to that ramping up time, you'll notice that you can gain hours in your day, 20 to 60 minutes at a time. Because what happened just there? Did you really need to sit on the toilet for 45 minutes while you read that series of articles on Facebook and you went down that rabbit hole? Probably not. Probably you could have been done in like 10, 15 minutes and then gotten started. Did you really need to clean that thing or wash your car or just sit there because you just didn't decide to get up yet? And that's the one for me, is I'm like not actually doing anything. I'm just like in a chair that isn't where it needs to be, and then that for some reason becomes the thing that stops me from starting in time. And so having like deliberate start times, and also training your brain to recognize when that resistance is that kind of precursor procrastination of starting.
Yeah.
And as soon as you feel that, you need, and I'm not exaggerating, run to your productivity space and
Yep.
immediately do something. Like you need to just get your butt in that chair and immediately do something productive, because given enough fuel, that will become your entire day, your entire week, your entire month. Years will go by and you will have never actually really started anything because there was always some really urgent, pressing thing that really, if you left it until a little bit later, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But it feels so important at the time that it can stop you from starting.
Yeah, it's amazing how, like, and pretty much I bet everybody in the chats, because from what I gather, I think everyone in our chats is a cartoonist and is active making comics. So let us know if this is your experience. Did you guys notice that, like, anytime you sit down to actually work on your comic, everyone comes out of the woodwork? Like, you get from friends who haven't talked to you in like 10 years. Your, neighbor needs help with their yard. Like every single thing that could possibly come up, like the pencils need sharpening, the floor needs vacuuming. Everything's urgent or feels urgent and seems to kind of happen when you're ready to get in your art space. If you guys have experienced that, welcome to the club. That is part of that, and this is something that like transcends art. Like it's definitely something I've noticed with people, and you usually can notice it better if you're not the person in it. Like how many of you guys have had moments at a workplace where somebody's on a diet and then that day they just started their diet, but guess what? Somebody brought in donuts. Like, and it's and you can see the person gradually break down from something that's positive to eating that donut. And it's like that's pretty much the life of doing art. You actually have to be like, no, I've made a decision to do this art and I'm going to do it. I'm going to sit down and do it. And what's weird is by doing that and honoring that, you experience that less and less. Like to me today, it was not a hassle to get to my art. I had a window that was open and I got to it and I got my art done for the day. I was pleased to just have that moment. Like I saw this window of open opportunity and I took it without hesitation, without resistance. But that is something that's built up. And if I take a week off from doing what I'm doing, I'm going to experience all that resistance again um, because that's the nature of this thing. We're doing something that's bettering ourselves. And in order to do that, it has to be a conscious choice that you just repeat and repeat and repeat. And once you've done that, what you'll find, that's the weird part of it. At first it's going to feel like you're not getting a break, and at first you kind of have to be kind of hard on yourself, like, and be like, I'm not going to get a break. I'm going to sit down. Like it's like the 100 days challenge. You're like, I'm going to carve out 30 minutes a day and work on the thing I want to do.
So I have a
And
trick.
yeah,
Tell
but the
tell
neat
me.
thing,
Go ahead. Sorry.
the byproduct of that is like often you'll end up with more time because you've actually prioritized your task. And so once that's done, you not only get relaxation time, but it's real relaxation because you don't have this weight over you. And this is something I think most creatives feel if they really need to create. They feel this weight, like this pressure, like I should be working on this. I should be, and it's like a shame cycle,
Yeah.
and it can last for years, and that's not productive. There's a lot of studies on shame. We can do that as a topic too. But Brene Brown's a really brilliant writer and actually has a whole Netflix special that I've watched like half of. But I've read a couple of her books and stuff. But she has some brilliant work on shame and like just psychological studies on shame and how like unvaluable it is as a tool for motivation for people or for change.
Yeah, and her difference between shame and guilt is fascinating.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
And we'll have to touch on that. But the point being, like, if you're in that shame cycle, and you're not actually being productive, then your relaxation time is just the shameful, depressing time that. Whereas if you actually get that chunk done, and you have relaxation time, like it's brilliant because you don't have this weight over you. It's just like this. It's actual relaxation. Like today, I'm planning on carving out like 30 minutes to read this comic. I'm going to be able to like sit and read this comic, which
Yeah.
which is something that where I had I come home because I've been really excited about this. This is a book I've been waiting for like 4 years. It's the conclusion of like somebody's masterwork that they've worked on for over 15 years, and it's I'm sure it's going to be good. If I had sat down because I was so excited to read that and just bypassed the need for me to do my comic, it would have been a longer read. I would have been less attentive to what I was reading because my mind would be split focus between the art I needed to do that I'm not doing and this book. And so like the relaxation is actually more tension, and you're adding more tension, which means more stress, which means more doubt, which means more shame cycles. I'm getting a little too into it, but I guess my point is like, the weird thing is by doing that kind of regimented thing, it's like you're actually answered with rest and sleep. It's really weird. It's a weird trade off, you know.
Yeah, and so I think we should definitely tackle shame and guilt as a topic. I want to kind of talk about this trick that I've started to do with myself, because I find what you just described to be very valid. Where I if I'm not working on my stuff and I'm using that as a procrastination rather than as a mental downtime, to recuperate and rejuvenate. It is a very kind of downward cycle thing where I'm not present in that moment. I'm not enjoying what I'm doing. I'm not relaxing. I'm just
Yeah.
mentally beating myself up. So here's one way that I've been able to kind of use both of those things to my advantage. Is I will set little micro goals and I will
Yeah.
reward myself with this. And so I'll be like, okay, I need to be productive for this amount of time, and then
Hmm.
I will stop and reward myself with, playing a video game for 30 minutes, or reading a comic, or going on a walk outside, or taking my motorcycle out. And if I just take my motorcycle out and I just drive around for like an hour, I don't really enjoy that. But if I am using that as a break to kind of give my body and my mind a rest from some like serious production, man, it's so good and it's so relaxing and I love it. And so TJ Dupree has an interesting comment. He said, that is so valid. I'm not a cartoonist, but I do graphic design and fine art. Same thing happens. There's a period of time where starting my art project is even painful, and I look for that other thing, which I really know better than, because creating becomes a zen space for me, and it's just the starting that I actively or subconsciously avoid, which is really interesting because a lot of this became super clear for me when I was reading Stephen Pressfield's War of Art, because he has this concept of resistance, and he literally says what TJ just said, which is that resistance does not try to stop you while you're producing. It tries to stop you from starting. And so
Yeah.
the difficult part is the battle to start. And so that was one piece of advice that I gave my student, is like, be very conscious, because you don't have a lot of time right now in your final semester, you know, and be very conscious of how long it takes you to start.
Yeah.
The other thing, the other piece of advice that I think was super important that I gave was, you need to label and carve out and fight for blocks of time,
Yep.
and that includes blocks of time to rest, blocks of time to sleep, blocks of time to eat, blocks of time to go to school, blocks of time to work on your projects, blocks of time to spend. Like, it sounds really almost pedantic, or really kind of like overly robotic or overly analytical. But there are some exceptionally busy people
Yeah.
that get a lot done by just doing two things. They just dedicate specific blocks of time. This is the time that I do this. And when they're doing that, that's the only thing that they do. And this is
Yep.
so hard for me, because to this day, I still believe that I can multitask, um, even though neurologically I know that it's impossible. Um, so interesting little factoid. Men are completely incapable of multitasking. We can task switch quickly, um, but we can't multitask. Women can multitask. Women's corpus callosum, which is the gateway between the two lobes, the two hemispheres, are like ridiculously large compared to men's. But that, there's some trade-offs with compartmentalization and whatever. But men and women both, whether you have a giant corpus callosum or not, like splitting your focus amongst a number of different things
Yeah.
does water down your experience in that thing. And so if you have some dedicated time, um, dedicate that time. Don't just say, this is the time that I'm going to sort of do this thing while I also do a bunch of these other things. And I kind of like incrementally, push all 15 of these balls up the hill, like a centimeter at a time. Like, now get one ball up that hill, then put it down, and then go get another ball. Get that ball up that hill. Because, what's really going to happen is you're not going to really make any progress on anything. And you're going to do subpar work, and your thought processes are not going to be dedicated, and things like that. And so another thing that I think that was a piece of advice that I gave today was dedicated blocks of time, and then be present in those blocks.
Yep.
So And then,
That's
sorry,
great.
go ahead.
That's great advice, and I think just kind of tacking onto that, one of the things you mentioned earlier about like kind of carving out blocks of time for different things like rest and stuff like that. That also ties into the kind of like reward system that you psych yourself out to, and I think most cartoonists I know use that all the time, where it's like, when I finish this panel, then I will get a glass of water.
Right.
When I finish this panel, I will do this. When I finish this text bubble, then I will do this. And it's like you're taking a giant task. Like all of this has to do with back planning. What you're doing is taking a big unachievable task and you're carving it into little chunks that are achievable, and then you're rewarding each achievement along the way. So this ties into something we talked about last week too, which is reflecting on your success. Like you're allowing yourself a moment to pause and kind of celebrate that you finished a little thing. And by celebrate, I just mean like you're just doing daily stuff, but you're breaking it up and making a conscious effort to value those things. So like to me, I think that's super important, and that's an effective way to be able to cut out some of that task switching penalty. Because like I said, if you've kind of um, they call it priming in psychology, but if you've primed yourself for the coming change, the change is way less shocking to the system.
Yeah.
So even if it's a simple change, it sounds like I'm joking with the glass of water, but I'm not. Like even if it's a simple change like that, where it's like I got to finish this part, and then I can have a glass of water, and then I'll have that walk away from the table to get back. If you break things down into increments, um, they get incrementally done. Whereas if you try to tackle the whole, which is usually I think that's one of the most crippling things that prevents people from starting, is like trying to just tackle like the whole chunk.
Oh yeah.
Like get this whole thing done today. And what's weird is by trying to do that, you can be less effective than being like, I'm going to get this chunk done, then this chunk done, then this chunk done. Because like I said, it's much more crippling to try to kind of take on a boulder and move it up a hill. It's a lot simpler if you break the boulder into little pieces that you can move up the hill.
Yeah.
It's just it's one's a much more effective way to get it actually done, whereas the other is kind of a Sisyphean kind of task. Like you're kind of setting yourself up for a
Ravens
Greek.
and eagles eating your liver every day, and
Exactly, those eagles.
so I think it'd be interesting at this point to talk about some of the neurological benefits, and we're coming up on an hour, so I'll be really fast. There's some super interesting studies talking about downtime, and basically what they've done is they've categorized that restful wakefulness, and I've talked about this a lot because I'm super interested in it. I'll stop saying the word super. But the restful wakefulness is where you're not asleep and you're not in programmed time. It's unprogrammed time. And so when you are watching television, when you are doing something that someone else is taking over your sensory and perception of what's going on, that is programmed time. Where your mind doesn't get to decide what to think or feel, but you are being programmed by somebody else, which is still fine, right? But like watching TV and watching a movie, they're fun and they can be good breaks. But the real value in those is in processing that information with other people afterwards,
Yeah.
which is a whole different thing. But unprogrammed time, so being bored or doing something that involves fine motor skills, coarse motor skills, but not a lot of process of thought. This can all lead you to daydreaming, and daydreaming is a state that happens when you're in the default mode network. And the default mode network is a state of mind that has been proven to increase your long-term memory, increase your empathy with other people, increase your creativity, almost to the point where it's a 1-to-1 ratio where you are more creative the more time you have up to a point, and then you start to go crazy, actually. And so that's why solitary confinement in jail is like really cruel, is because we're not meant to not be, like to be unprogrammed time 100% of the time. But the more bored you are immediately before trying to do something creative, literally the more creative you will be. And they've done studies on that. And then also your visual spatial reasoning and your neuroplasticity, which is your mind's ability to adapt and learn new things and to make connections between previously unconnected events and facts, and skills and things, increases as well. And they've done a lot of studies that as little as 30 minutes a day of restful wakefulness, unprogrammed time while you're awake, will give you these huge benefits. And so I am bad at this, but I'm trying to get better at it. But like, try things like this, and you will see that your production and your creativity, your relationships with other people, your memory, and all of these things will start to increase if you just do simple things. Try this. Try pooping without your phone. Try going to sleep without your phone. Try walking to work or school, or commuting to work or school, partially in silence. Try just being in nature without a screen in your face, even if you just have to go to the park and lean up against a tree. Try to subtract distraction for a short period of time, 10, 15 minutes a day, and try to add some sort of mindless creation where you're not thinking through the process, but it's just something that you can manipulate with your hands. If you do that, you will see huge watershed level neurological developments. And I've done this every semester for the past 5 years with my students, and I have really interesting comments. Like, they say things like, "I've started to dream again. I haven't dreamed in years," or "I've started to realize that my brain will solve super complex, difficult problems if I just do the dishes without the TV on." And
Yeah.
all of this stuff starts to happen. And it's so in my little microcosm of the world, it's been proven time and time again. So it'd be really interesting if you are on the edge of burnout, or if on the flip side, if you are kind of just wallowing in that ramping up, unproductive, nasty nothingness of not doing anything, and you want to get into that kind of middle range where you can kind of oscillate back and forth but still maintain like a healthy level of productivity. Try adding to your day some downtime,
Yeah.
and try deleting from your day some distraction. And that doesn't mean I'm saying everybody should delete all their accounts and throw all their devices away or whatever, but like, for a period of time, if you do that, you'll have huge benefits.
Yeah, I agree. And like we said at the top, like for me it's I commute for about an hour and a half, and it's a blessing and a curse, because the blessing of that is like there are often times on my commute where I'll listen to podcasts and stuff, but I usually spend at least a half an hour just in silence, just allowing my brain to think, and like to think whatever, like without kind of it's kind of like a meditative moment. And like
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a lot of studies on as hippie as it sounds, like there's a lot of psychological studies out there about the benefits of mindfulness
Yeah.
and of meditation. And I think that carries across a lot of different philosophies, the idea that there are moments of still are very beneficial to your brain's health and to thinking health. And unfortunately, I think in like marketing and advertising, and in like kind of the fast paced world that like most graphic designers and illustrators and cartoonists are in, I don't know if it's valued as much as it should be. Because like I said, if you want to think outside of the box, you need a moment to actually get outside of the box and really think. Um, and unfortunately, like I think those moments of quiet decrease the more our society kind of moves towards social media and stuff. So I think that's excellent advice, Cory. That's really cool.
I think
Now,
those moments of quiet decrease as we move towards transhumanism, and we're all going to be cyborgs soon. I have
well, yeah,
a
robots that are going to all take all of our jobs are trying to condition us to
no beyond
robot.
beyond the robots that are taking all of our jobs. I'm talking about. I really think wearable tech is going to turn into implantable tech. Is going to turn into we are all going to be, like have additional senses. I'm going to have a microchip that will give me the ability to see ultraviolet. I'm going to,
Yeah,
and then all of that is going to, anyway, this is a whole different discussion, but all that is going to happen, brought to you by giant corporations or the government. Either of those are going to not allow you to not be sold as a product to the advertisers. And so anyway, that's a whole different thing. I
that's
just
a great wormhole. We cannot get into it tonight, but you continue. So
get out your tinfoil hats and just know that while you're allowed to, you should enjoy moments of silence.
yes, before you really see the secret messages that are coded in our cross hatching. That's a callback to an older episode. But I do want to go in that wormhole some other time. Thank you to everybody who's like joined us in the chats. It's been pretty cool. TJ Dupree was asking if you could leave the name of some of the books you mentioned, and also mentioned that sleeping without tech is hard. Falling asleep listening to podcasts is my norm. I really recommend sleep without any devices, because I do think the thought processes that you have, like even 5 minutes before going to bed, carry into your sleep. And like often, if you're allowing controlled thought to kind of happen before you go to bed, like you'll wake up with controlled thought as opposed to your own thoughts. So yeah, but yeah. So I'm sure Cory, maybe you can give him some of the books.
Yeah.
Um,
So if you want to go down this rabbit hole of the connection between boredom and creativity, I haven't read books on that. There are a lot of articles about studies, and just look up boredom and creativity. You'll see some stuff about cab drivers, several things about mice that they've done, several tests on creativity and things like that. I had a site at one point in time, Turn Off to Activate, which I let go when I switched over to Squarespace, but I still have that hosted somewhere. I just can't remember the link. So
nice.
I'll post that in the description of this video,
Cool.
and once I remember where that is.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So I think that about wraps it. I mean, that was a great conversation. So you can check out more of Cory's awesome art and thoughts and just amazing stuff at CoryKerr.com. You can subscribe to the podcast and follow the podcast at CoryKerr.com/48HR. And if you're listening to this on iTunes or another podcast, just please leave it a nice review in the review section. The best place would be the Apple Store. Just leave us like a 5-star rating, or 4-star, whatever the highest star is, and a comment. Or if you think we're worth 1 star, leave that and leave a terrible comment. But I either will help the algorithm and trick the robots into getting us more listeners. And then you can check out my stuff at joshuakemble.com. And as usual, you can also go to quarterlystories.com, and that'll take you right to Quarterly Stories on that page. And that'll pretty much do it for 145. So we will see you guys. Oh, also, if you're around tomorrow, I think Cory might be joining us, but I'll be doing Artcasters with the special guest Kevin Cross, and probably with Cory as well. So we will see you guys then. And then, like Cory mentioned too, an unusual day for an art check, but definitely tune in on Sunday. Well, on Cory's channel, because we'll be doing a 48-hour art check with. I'm sorry, was the guest
Taylor Cashton.
Taylor Cashton, who's a badass kind of heavy hitter graphic designer, and like Cory iterated at the beginning, it sounds really like a great topic. So probably tying into the one we had.
Yeah.
So we will talk to you guys then.